I know this is a very guy thing. And I don't know if I don't. Probably some women might relate to this, but I don't. Not broadly, so probably anyway. But I'm going to tell you that I I have always wanted to excel at sports of some kind. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball in the worst way. Um, I remember in 1961 watching Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris battle it out for the home run title, and I thought I want to be like Mickey. And then I found out Mickey had grown up in Oklahoma, and I thought, I really now want to be like Mickey Mantle and want to be like Sandy Koufax. Well, there were several things that kept me from being like Sandy Koufax, not the least of which was talent. The other was I'm right-handed and he is a lefty. So anyway, there is one particular thing that is common among all the athletes. Pick any sport, any endeavor. It also goes beyond athletics. Think about any outstanding, excellent musician, business person, anybody who is outstanding, anybody who has excelled and continues to excel and can sustain that excellence. There is one common thread, more than one, I'm sure, but one particular common thread is the thread of self-discipline. They don't need a coach, a teacher, or a boss to stand behind them with a stick to whack them or a whistle to blow, or they don't need someone outside themselves to make them put in the effort for excellence. It comes from within, and the word for it, 2 words, compound word, is self-discipline. Nobody is accidentally excellent. Now there are some people who what appears to be accidentally are excellent at certain things, but that excellence doesn't grow and expand, and it isn't sustained by just their natural talent. It's sustained by the things that self-discipline produces in them. And one of the things that self-discipline produces in these people of excellence is consistent, intentional effort toward excellence. This shows up in the form of practice. I read an interesting book years ago. The title is Talent is Overrated. And the author talks about people who are in this upper echelon of excellence. And one of his conclusions, he studied hundreds of these kinds of people in all sorts of disciplines and endeavors. And it was very interesting to me. Each of them had put in 10,000 hours of practice. Now, this is not just practice. This is 10,000 hours of intentional, focused practice, meaning they didn't just say, I'll practice, or, I'm gonna, no. It is focusing on a piece of the performance required intentionally and practicing it. 10,000 hours of that kind of practice. And there is unquestionably, there are people who have their natural ability is higher than others. Michael Jordan. He wasn't always the GOAT, the greatest of all times in basketball, but he did have innate talent. What propelled him forward was that kind of focused, intentional practice. Okay, I could go on and on about that, but the energy for this, what compels this is their self-discipline. Michael Phelps, one of the most, maybe the most decorated, having the most gold medals of any summer Olympian. He didn't get where he got by just latent talent. He got there through self-discipline. Oh gosh. Getting up at 4 a.m. to be in the pool and doing hard workouts for 3 or 4 hours in the morning, and often, from what I understand, 3 or 4 hours at night. It's like, what? That requires self-discipline. Why am I doing that? Because Paul writes to Timothy in 2 Timothy 1, verse 7, for the Spirit God gave us, what Spirit is that? His Spirit, does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. I'm amazed at the measure of self-discipline that is possible for humans on strictly a human level. But Paul's not talking about that. Paul's talking about self-discipline that we derive from God's Spirit in us. That's an interesting concept. Our capability to live well and to discipline ourselves comes from not us so much as the Holy Spirit. And then He gives us power to discipline ourselves. There's this very interesting partnership between the power of the Holy Spirit and our willingness to discipline ourselves. I think sometimes I'm guilty of it really comes down to wishful thinking. Man, if only the Holy Spirit would do this in my life. Then I'm waiting for the ding, right? And it doesn't happen very often. Generally, not. Why? Because the Holy Spirit, the Spirit God gave us, resides in us. It's not like God goes, here, I'll give you a little bit there. Now a little bit there, and oh, you feel that tingling? Well, okay, I'm giving you more Spirit. No, He doesn't do it. His whole Spirit comes to reside in us. To whatever degree, then, we are able to respond to the Spirit and His promptings and His power and work in our lives, that really is the measure of our effective living. Okay? Self-discipline is the product of the Spirit that God has given us, and me permitting, inviting, cooperating with that Spirit, God's Spirit, so that I will be self-disciplined. When you're a child, discipline is enforced from outside. And as we mature, it then becomes more essential, not just important, but essential, that we discipline ourselves. Paul writes in Galatians what he calls the fruit of the Spirit. He calls fruit of the flesh, and he has this catalog of broken behaviors, sin. And he doesn't list every sin, but he kind of lists a representative catalog. And then he says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. And the last one, number 9, self-control. Self-control is not totally synonymous with self-discipline, but I think it is essentially the same thing. And I don't think it's by accident that Paul, inspired by the Holy Spirit, starts with love on this list of the fruit, what the things that the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God, produces in us. He begins with love, and it's like the bookends are love and self-control. Self-control is essential for us to be able to live within God's design. Because honestly, there are times when living within God's design feels not great. Because often, and my experience is often, living within God's design means saying no to things outside His design, and often those are my desires. So, in verse 7 of 2 Timothy 1, the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. Okay. Can you see why self-discipline needs to be in that triumvirate? Because it starts with power. Undisciplined power is very dangerous and harmful to the people around the powerful, but also to that person of power. Power, the use of power, the appropriate use of power, and I'll even say within God's design, requires self-control, self-discipline. Power, love. Learning how to love sustainably, consistently, requires self-discipline. There are times I don't want to love. I want to pout. I want to hold the grudge. I don't want to love. Self-discipline is required. I don't know that there's any of the most, whatever fits in God's design for us to live that way, for us to discover and live within God's design so that we will have our best life, requires self-control. And the Holy Spirit, God's very Spirit given to us, makes it possible. He gives us a power for self-control, self-discipline that goes beyond our own bootstrapping effort. That's important. So I want to just ask you, in the last few seconds here, what area of your life do you sense you most need to engage with self-discipline? Don't beat yourself up. Just notice it. And then accept the power and help of God's Spirit so that you will be able to discipline yourself toward that outcome. See you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.